Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review, and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. Today I have a discussion with my good friend Ezra here about his new book, Blood Rain, which releases in 2 days from when we're recording this, but when you're watching it, it'll already be out. So, Ezra, would you like to kind of introduce yourself to the viewers and let them know what they're in for?
Yeah, as people already know from the title of the the book, I'm Ezra Payne. I enjoy fantasy and sci-fi in all forms, be it games, books, films, and I'm just about to release a book for the first time, so it's quite an exciting moment. It's actually weird watching someone else holding the book that you've been working on for 3 or so years, but yeah, no, it's going to be good. I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Um, I'm excited for people to read it. As I haven't finished the book, and we've actually just been talking about how I'm ashamed to have not finished before the interview. But I'm almost halfway through, and have been really enjoying it. Especially, I mean, we were talking about the fast pace. Um, I was wondering. So we've talked through a few questions up front. So let's go through and have a chat through those. So, would you like to tell me kind of any inspirations that you had for Blood Rain?
It, the inspiration, this is probably not the correct answer, because my book reading journey was stifled in high school. You usually get the books like Of Mice and Men, objectively good, but when someone asks you what did the writer think about this several times over, and even the religious background where you're studying religious texts over and over again, it kind of killed the joy of reading. But as far as stories are concerned, I loved mythology. Back even when we were in primary school and you just learn about, the Medusa and the Jason, the Argonauts, and
Hmm.
all the Egyptian gods and what they worship, what they believed. It was amazing. And then World of Warcraft, not necessarily even for the storytelling, but the actual worlds themselves.
Hmm.
Um, Thoroughly enjoyed that. Any fantasy. I enjoyed the trilogy, obviously, as everyone does, of Lord of the Rings. Those films still have a special place in my heart for that's the thing. And also the book as well. I did read that. A little bit more difficult to pass than your modern fantasy, but still enjoyed it.
Hmm.
Well ahead of its time. And dare I say, bad writing as well. So there were certain films that I watched and I thought, I feel like I could do better than that, But maybe in my hubris and arrogance, but I'm sure people will humble me as the general populace tends to. But it was a mixture of these things that kind of just made me form these ideas. And when I didn't actually go about and think I'm going to write this book, it was more like you pick up some ideas and you put them on your phone in your notes page, etc. And over the course of years, you end up with like what tens of thousands of words. And I was at my desk at work one day, and I was trying to work, but I couldn't actually work from the storm of ideas that were rattling around under my head. Just, oh, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And I was like, I'm going to actually have to write this down so I can actually continue in my job. So it's that was essentially what forced me to write. That was in December 2020.
Hmm.
Remember that with a great clarity, and I'm glad I actually did. It was not necessarily that I wanted to write the book; it's like I needed to. I felt like this drive to get it completed, and here it is, I guess. So hopefully the fruits of my labors pay off.
Yeah, I mean, how many of us think we have a book inside of us, but you've got it out and you've sent it to me in the
That's it.
post, which is
Yeah,
very
it's
impressive.
it's
Um,
wild.
yeah. So while we're talking about the book, so one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about was, are you an outliner or are you a discovery writer? So do you plan everything meticulously, or do you kind of make it up as you go along with little bit of a frame?
I can't say I'll make things up as I go along, but you will get like ideas and pieces of inspiration from random events. But I do like to outline. I like to know where I'm going and what happens in the beginning, the middle, the end, how to tie all the knots together, make sure there's no holes. But yeah, I definitely prefer an outline. It gives. I do like my structure. Maybe it's a character flaw in itself, but yeah, I can't just start writing and just see. Oh, let's see where this goes. But yeah, I do love an outline.
Hmm.
I think I heard somewhere that are you trying to write your own book? Do you reckon an outliner or a discovery person?
So I'm working on a fantasy trilogy, which was inspired by me watching. like years ago, watching some sci-fi films and thinking some of these ideas are cool, but what if it was swords and dragons? Um, and then kind of like going, this would be cool if it was fantasy, and then kind of writing a few notes and then being like, oh, actually, I'd rather do this, and I'd rather do this, and so the
Yeah,
original story has very much has been left behind. And
yeah.
I have outlined three novels very basically, and I'm now trying to work through and outline in detail each one so that I know the very basic plot beats for each book. And the first book is almost fully outlined, but I
Okay.
kind of want to do all three before I start writing the first one.
Ah,
So
I suppose, yeah, yeah. If you do all the outlines for all three of them, you know exactly where to go for each one of the books, and you don't, yeah, trip over yourself in things, lock yourself out of the story, etc. I remember doing something similar because, like yourself, when I first started this, the story, the zero draft, we'll call it, was very different from the finished product. The
mm,
first draft is very similar to what we have currently, but the zero draft was wild. Yeah, but in fact, the actual first story that I was going to write was the sequel to the book that I've actually written already. Now that's obviously been long abandoned because some of the ideas were like a bit too much, and yeah, wouldn't put that in print and be proud
mm.
about it. But yeah, this one I can say I'm quite proud of it. But yeah, I'd like to see your sci-fi dragons and swords novel when it does release as well.
Yeah, I actually ended up swapping dragons for airships because I was like, dragons are so popular. I'm going to do
Yeah.
airships. Um, So, speaking about future Hateful Tales books, so I know you're writing the sequel, and I think you said later this year on your website. Is that right?
Oof, I will probably have the second draft ready later this year. But it's definitely not coming out this year. I'm not that fast. It's it's a long process, I think, but I'm hoping to have. I did actually say when I first started this, when everyone said, "Oh, this is going to be a sequel," I said, "There's exactly two," and that evolved quite quickly as things tend to spiral out of control. One of the things was just like I didn't in the two books I had outlined in great detail. I hadn't addressed a quite a major plot point in one of the other books. Not necessarily that
Mm,
it was missing, but it's just like you should really talk about this. I
mm.
was like, I guess that's book three, and then you kind of just spawn. It's like, oh, you didn't cover this in book three. It's like, well, I guess that's book four. And it's just, but yeah, it's. We'll see how far we get. I want to go all the way with this one, but it does have a definitive end. I don't know, just chaos drafted the start to finish of the entire series. So
Ooh.
hopefully we'll get there.
Mm. Have you got any plans for any like supplemental novellas and things like that? I know that's really popular in
Yeah,
fantasy nowadays.
it's as you said before, the pace of the novel is blindingly fast. I think it's there's definitely room for expansion within some of the stories. Even some of the stories are actually already in there. Maybe just putting them in detail. Some of the characters, the arcs that they go through, putting some details in there, and
Mm.
maybe characters that aren't even in the story, but are just adjacent to the other characters in the story. We could do some novellas about that. I actually have several on my phone currently in the notes page that are just waiting for extra time for me to be sat at this desk and writing some more.
Mm. I remember when I was reading it, and there was like, because obviously you do have a few big time jumps in the in
Mm.
the first sections of the book. We, by the way, this is going to be no zero spoilers, guys. But the one thing I will say is that there are time jumps, so don't worry, they're very early on. Uh, but I remember when you get to you meet Vale again, and I was thinking to myself, like, oh, there's a novella in what happened to her in these time jumps. I could just see it. I was like, oh, there's a
I
novella
could write
here.
that. I think I could write that to be honest. But yeah, I'll add that to the list actually.
um, so now, I mean, when we're talking about future writing stuff, have you got any ideas or any plans to write outside of the Hateful Tales world?
I've got a few. So some of them novellas and stories, I thought, well, what if we could do this concept? They're very early in their conception. But I think you could do at this point it would be novellas. I haven't got like another series in me just yet, but we've got time. We can think about that down the road. But yeah, maybe just jumping into sci-fi, trying something like that. I find it's a bit weird actually, but especially when you go to read and you'll read some books and you'll be like, oh, Massachusetts, USA. And that doesn't mean anything to me. Now, obviously, if someone lives in Massachusetts, USA, they know exactly what the style is. But if you talk about a fantasy world, you have to tell people what it is because they don't know. And starting from scratch like that, when you do have a book, it's easier, I'd say, in my personal opinion. But I think I'd probably prefer to do something like that again, just build another sort of world or another setup and tell people what's different about this one, what's maybe similarities. But yeah, there's definitely a few stories that we've got lined up, and possibly adjacent to the characters or even the gods in this book. But yeah,
Cool.
we've got some plans.
Oh, that sounds exciting. I do really like when you have kind of these whole big kind of story arcs and universes and that sort of thing. I really
Yeah.
like you. I think you said that the books are modal. Is that right? Is that the right term? Where each book could kind of be read standalone, but also they come together.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't just jump straight into, say, if book three was out, you'd say, oh, let's just read book three. You can, but you'd be missing some parts. Like, I think I've watched some films actually before where I thought, this is great, but it feels like something's missing. It's just like, and because there's actually another film before it that you should have watched.
Mm,
But the film itself held its own because it was a standalone story. And I do
mm,
prefer that. Like, controversially, I tend not to read book two in any series, probably because I'm too early in the journey at the moment. I just want to get a taste for other people's writing style. So I'll read one book and then move on to a different series. Some
mm.
people absolutely hate me for that, but I'm sure I'll get to the point where I'll just revisit these stories because some of them were definitely good. But yeah, I wanted it to be. I'm sorry that if you did just read book one, you got a full and complete story at
Mm.
the end of it. It wasn't just like, oh, a massive cliffhanger at the end, because I actually don't like that as well. It's like, you didn't tell you where I'm going next. It's like, what happens? It was just, but yeah, because then you've got to wait for the next book. I don't think I'm fast enough to be like, oh, it's going to be out in 6 months. Yeah, it's going to be a bit longer, shall we say. But yeah, I wanted people to have a full and complete story, is why I call it modal. So you'll have a full and complete story, and the next one will have more characters with returning faces as well, but just adding more to the world with each one
Mm.
is the plan.
I've often, I really like when so you see some things. So you'll have like, oh, the second book is a completely new set of characters, but oh wait, halfway through it, the first book characters turn up. That's always a good trope. I mean, Brandon Sanderson has done that quite well in the Mistborn books, where you're like, oh, you're completely doing something else, and then it's like, actually, no, it's all really closely related.
Yeah, I
Um,
did read The Way of Kings. It was dense, shall we say. It took me months to get through it, but it was objectively good. I can see why people froth at the mouth
mm.
of all the work that he does. He puts a lot of love and attention to those stories, I can tell.
Yeah, and I think he writes those Stormlight books as a trilogy, and then like edits them into a single book. Uh, so that's why they're like 1,500 pages,
Right, so you
um,
haven't read one book, you've read three when you've picked up one of those books, right?
basically. So when he's done and there's 10, it will basically be a 30 book series. Uh, now,
Yeah, that's a lot of reading for someone.
yeah, I have read four of those Stormlight books, so that's like I think they're 4,000 pages in total on Kindle. So that's a lot of time. Um, Now, we were talking a little bit about world building. What's how did you kind of come by the world building? What would you say was like the process for you? Is it kind of just an idea here, an idea there, or
Kind of. One of the main character of this novel, Noxalis, the poster child, if you will, actually came from World of Warcraft. It was even the name itself was an effort to get a unique username on the server that no one else had. You don't want to just call your character something very generic. So
mm,
that's where that came from. And then it was even just like the armor that she wears was inspired by the transmog that I actually gave the character there. It's
mm,
just, and I don't know whether it is just my mind. You just kind of think, oh, what if this character had backstory? What if they have friends? What would they look like? What world would they live in? And you
mm,
kind of bleed in your inspiration from your own experiences in life. Maybe the characters share those. Your own dispositions, maybe you give them to a character, dial them up to 11 in some cases. and I do enjoy that. And yeah, you come up with a story, and it's I do enjoy giving characters backstory, like lore, essentially. So you could just bring up a concept to the table, and you think, all right, so what's around them? You just kind of build out from there.
Mm.
I think that's probably how I tend to go for it. But it's a mix of organic and focused world building. As in, you might just get these random ideas that pop into your head. It's like, oh, how could we incorporate this? And then you might actually
Mm.
just sit down and think, okay, how do we fill this hole in the plot? But yeah, it's good.
Yeah, the one idea that have come up with was when I was working on the story, and then was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if like you could throw a sword and then it would come back to you like Thor's hammer or something? And I was
Yeah.
like, that's a good idea. And then I like was like ran away with that idea. Um,
It's sometimes just simple and small things like that. You can kind of just build your own kind of story from that. I'm guessing that's going to be in your novel that we eagerly await as well. But one of the interesting ones actually was one of the characters needed to get across or traverse long distances, but couldn't do it alone.
mm,
Um, and I made this other character for them, and it turned out that they became a tour de force in the actual lore of the novel. That wasn't supposed to happen, but that's that's how it turns out. Sometimes you just run away with your ideas, and you make characters that some people think, "Oh, that's the best character in the book." I was like, "Oh, well, it's an interesting one."
cool. Um, well, we're talking about characters actually, so I wanted to talk to you about Sar. So I don't know if I pronounced that right. I assume so.
No,
Now,
Sardash is one of my favorites.
yeah, so she feels like the most important character in the book. So obviously, the protagonist sometimes not the most important character,
Mm.
to the world as it were. She feels really important for the majority of the book that I've read, but I like how her character initially appears to be quite kind of not one note, but she appears to be very much like I hate humans, I like murder and killing and what have you. And then suddenly, I say suddenly, and then slowly she kind of grows and grows and grows. And I think that her caring for Knox, kind of around the section that I'm at, is something that I thought was really interesting. So how do you approach writing a character like Sar, who's kind of morally grey and she's kind of heroic and also villainous and lots of different things?
I enjoy giving the characters because you can make characters that are just evil and everyone's supposed to hate them. But I like to make characters that are dangerous because
Mm,
then you can give them motivations or actions that are a bit questionable. Maybe some people think, yeah, it was completely fine. Others like, I'm not sure about this character. And across that novel, you can get mixed opinions across the characters about who this is and what they are essentially. Now, for some people, maybe she's just a murderer, and for the other side of the spectrum, maybe we just absolutely love the character.
mm,
And I enjoy writing that because it makes it more interesting when you get a character who's not necessarily liked by everyone universally, because you can get the hyper heroic characters. And honestly, I do enjoy the villains a bit more because if you do have a character who's always the paragon of justice, gets a little bit dull in certain instances. You can fall into the trap of making a character a little bit too heroic. But it's, I think it makes it more fun. I think when your character's a bit morally grey. I do enjoy a morally grey character, someone that you're
mm.
not really supposed to root for, but kind of do. But
I think that they often end up being the fan favorites.
mm, yeah, definitely for me as well.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit more about the kind of writing process, as it were. So, how have you found your self-pub experience so far? I mean,
It was,
we're kind of
yeah.
2 days early to talk about it because you're releasing on Saturday. But
It's as far as the actual process is concerned, it started much earlier, as you'll notice, because you've got to start at the first draft, and then it's been fun. It's been expensive. I didn't cut any corners with this novel. I did actually go through the whole process of like you get your alpha readers, you get your paid beta readers, then you get your copy editors, you get your proofreaders. You just make sure the novel is as spotless as you can get it, essentially.
mm,
And because you don't have a massive corporation giving you this information, and these benefits, so to speak. You are on your own in that aspect. But it's been nice having the control and the the learning curve of the business essentially side of things. But it's nice actually having this to say on what things look like at the end. For instance,
Yeah.
you actually get the cover art, you actually get the title, whereas I don't think you do when you go to a traditional publishing. Maybe they'll consider it, but yeah, it's nice to have that control. Also, one of the things with the traditional publishing that I've heard is that maybe they like your book one, but when you give them book two, they're like, I'm not sure about this one, and then you have to go to another publisher, and then your
Mm.
novel gets split across different companies, which is not fun, so to speak. So I like having the amount of control with self-publishing,
Mm.
and it's interesting because seems to be a lot of love in the community. I'm obviously quite new to the community itself, but there seems to be quite a lot of love for people who are self-published, and you get a lot of labors of love from the novels that people create. That they are, as you said, like the novel that they wanted to get out and put on the table for
Mm.
people. So it's been a fun journey, but obviously it's not even finished.
Yeah.
One of the things I really don't like, and I think this would be exactly the same for traditional publishing, is marketing. I'm not a big fan of that. Just it's like, oh, you've got to sell yourself. But I'm actually the worst person at doing this. It's just like cringe every time I have to post something on Facebook and Instagram. It's like, I hope people don't mind. But yeah, you've obviously got to overcome this and just think you've got to actually give people a product. Even like, for instance, if there was a game coming out, you wouldn't know until someone actually told you, or the
Mm.
company said, "By the way, this exists," and like it gives people an opportunity to see if they like it. So yeah, one of those hurdles that you just got to overcome. I see.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I literally work in marketing. I've been a marketer for 8 years, and I'm terrible at marketing my YouTube channel. I don't know whether it's kind of I don't want to have like a busman's holiday where I come home from work and
Yeah.
do more work. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that marketing is definitely one of the harder things for indie books. But then the thing I've been hearing from a lot of published authors is that unless you're Brandon Sanderson, they're not going to really market your book either.
No.
So you've
Mm.
still got to do all the marketing and you've got to become this author personality figure, but
Yeah.
you've got to do it, off your own back and you only see however many percent of the profit. Whereas at least with the self-published book, you're getting it all, which I think
Yeah.
is good. So what advice would you
Yeah.
give to aspiring authors who are thinking, and this isn't just me asking, I'm sure there's people watching who might feel like they've got a book in them. Um,
Yeah, it's. I think it's the drive. I think I've spoken to a lot of people who also wanted to write books, and one of the main answers that I get back is like, "Oh, I don't have the time."
mm,
And I feel like you have to make the time. You have to force yourself to cut things out. Maybe you don't watch that film on Netflix or that series, or maybe you don't doom scroll on Instagram for a couple of hours. You actually
mm,
set some time aside to um, make a schedule, even of like I'm going to write on extra time. For myself, it was on public transport to and from work. It's like it's literally dead time. You just sat there. You have to wait until you get to your destination, and that's like maybe 30 minutes where you're just like on your own. Put your headphones in. You can just write a bit of text. And
mm,
one of the things that also helps is organization. From the chaos notes that I started with, the 20,000 or so notes, if you put them all in a line, so to speak, and then just pick out the random sections of conversation and put them in orders of when they're supposed to happen, or
mm,
even the scenes, and give yourself that amount of clarity on where your direction is supposed to go. One of the things that does help, I'm guessing most other people do use it, is Scrivener.
mm,
This is obviously an advert, but it does organize your things rather than Microsoft Word, which is just like, this is your document. Scrivener is like, oh, this is book one, this is book two, this is book two, chapter one, this is book two, chapter one, part two. And you can just split it out like that, and it just makes things a lot easier to organize in your own mind. But when you can, maybe if you don't want to write one chapter, you can just skip ahead to the part that you've got and start writing in a completely different place in your book. It's so yeah, give yourself the time. Essentially, make the time to do it,
mm.
and organize it as much as you can, just so you don't get lost in your own head.
Yeah, I think there's a currently I know I don't know if you've seen, but I make 5 videos a week and I post a video Monday through
Yeah.
Friday,
Mm.
and I've decided I think that from here on out to instead of doing 2 book reviews a week to just do 1 book review and then spend that Wednesday evening doing writing stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping to, selfishly, I will also turn that into content. Uh,
You might as well. I mean, everything you can put in front of people. I think some people would enjoy the content as well, just to say like, oh, someone else is actually putting some time aside to write, and you can inspire people, hopefully, to
Mm.
do the same.
Yeah, I watch. I don't know if you saw when I did Andrew's video where we did the interview. He'd actually done a few months before a like day in the life of him writing his sequel to his book one,
Okay.
and I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that video. And I was like, well, I've been planning on writing this book for ages. Why don't I actually do it, and then I'll document it. So I'm working on. So I haven't decided whether I'm going to put out little videos or like one big video that's the whole project and be like,
Yeah.
this is an hour long, but it's the entire process of me writing this book from like over 2 years.
Some people
Um,
like it, to be fair, the long form videos, and they'll put it on the background. Much like yourself, if you enjoy like podcasts, they'll, I don't know, maybe if you just narrate what you're doing, they'll listen to it. Or maybe when you're watching dinner. I know, like when I'm just eating dinner, I'll just watch things whilst I'm just consuming stuff.
mm,
It's quite therapeutic, but and you can also make the videos that are just like 5 to 10 minutes long, where you just like give them the main points. You get a lot of options, but I we should do something similar myself, just like how the process from naught to completion, what actually happens. But yeah, one for the future.
yeah, yeah. Well, when you're doing kind of the third draft maybe for book two, you could document the process. That could be fun.
Yeah,
There's some
I'll
Instagram
put some
stories
notes
or
down.
something. Um, while we're closing out the kind of original questions we came we
Hmm.
I sent you in advance so that we could have a bit of a structure and all that. I thought I'd ask if you're reading anything really interesting at the moment, or are you kind of absorbed in Blood Rain launch?
And I've replaced since the launch is literally dominating pretty much every aspect of the writing process at the moment. Whilst I am on public transport, rather than writing, I'll do some reading. And at the moment, I'm on Goodreads.
Oh yeah.
Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. You've probably read it yourself. I haven't read, or I should say, haven't watched the series on Amazon or
Mm,
BBC, wherever it is. So I'm going in completely blind. I'm about halfway through. I do enjoy it. I do enjoy the humour. I enjoy the characters, and I love the irreverence of the whole novel. It's
mm.
quite fun. I've enjoyed it.
I've actually never read any Terry Pratchett, but I
No,
have watched the show, so I'm in the opposite boat. So I've seen the show but not read the book.
I have a tendency to, if I've actually watched it, I think I found this with Lord of the Rings. If I've watched the the show or the film, etc., I find it more difficult to read the book because I already know what happens. Whereas if you've
Mm,
not been exposed to anything, the book is fresh and new. You don't know what's going to happen at the end. So made a mental note in my own head just to try and avoid that. That said, I did watch the Harry Potter films before I read the first book, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book actually more than the film.
mm.
I can see why people enjoy it, to be fair, and they do say similar things. But yeah, it's I did read another Terry Pratchett book. I think it was The Colours of Magic,
Mm,
the first one, and it's a similar style. It's a little bit chaotic towards the end, but it's got a good sense of humor.
mm.
To enjoy his books.
Yeah, I need to read some Terry Pratchett. It's on my list.
Mm.
My TBR for 2024 basically filled up like super quickly and early because I was like, well, I'm going to tackle a few series and I'm going to do one a month. And then when I decided to go down from 6 books a month to four with like two possibles
Yeah.
as like like extras if I finish the four. Then I was like, oh, I'm basically reading four series. So am I going to be reading these 4 books every single month?
Oh,
But we'll see. I might start making some of those books every 2 months or taking breaks.
I
Um,
think you probably need the breaks. I think my Goodreads target is 12 this year. Just one a month. That's more than enough for me.
I got managed 52 last year, which is the
That's
most I've
impressive.
ever read. But the funny thing was, I read 30 since August starting the channel. So as soon as I started the channel, I like massively started reading more because obviously I needed to fill those
You
video
need to,
slots in the
yeah,
schedule.
you need to get that content. But yeah, yeah, what a week. Yeah, there's no world I don't think where I could do that unless yeah. But it's. Have you enjoyed it? I don't. What's the favorite for 2023? Shall we say
So yeah,
one you could recommend to me?
Difficult recommendation is my favorite book of 2023 because it's book three in a series and it's 1,500 pages. Um,
Okay.
so it's actually self-published as well. It's The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Carhill. So it ended up being maybe my favorite fantasy book of all time. I remember finishing it and like I went and talked to my wife and was like, I think I just read like the best fantasy book ever written, and she was like, can't be that good. Um, and I know a lot of people love it as well.
Yeah.
And it's obviously it's very highly rated and all this. And Ryan's like the darling of the indie booktube space and the indie space. Um, his earlier books in the series are a lot shorter and easier to get into. So the first one
Amazing.
is called Of Blood and Fire, I think, and that one
I think I've
I
heard of
would
this.
recommend that one. It's like only 600 pages, I think.
Only. That's
But yeah, very very
hilarious.
fast read and it's really fun.
Yeah.
I think you'll see a lot in a lot of commonality with Blood Rain. You know, you've got the morally grey characters, interesting magic, and interesting world building. Although his is a bit
Sold.
more traditional, so he's got his elves and his dwarves and
Ah,
whatever.
yeah. Okay.
Whereas like the Hexer obviously are a lot more interesting and different when it comes to kind of fantasy races, as it were.
Yeah, one of the things I actually decided on because when I did play World of Warcraft back in what was this 2012, the
Mm,
character of Noxus was an elf, the
mm,
blood elf, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that with this story. It's not going to be an elf; it's going to be a normal human. You kind of I've got obviously a lot of respect because I think it's Tolkien lore essentially of your dwarves and your elves and
mm.
extra races. But it's like, oh, you could add a few different more surely, just to pad it out to make it the world a bit more yours, shall we say, more original. But yeah, no, I'll still be giving that a read though. Add that to the TBR. I can see all these posts on Instagram on the booktube community or the bookish community of the massive TBRs. I was like, well, how do they have such a long list? So I was like, and then mine starts to rack up just as fast. I'm just like, yeah, I can see how this happens quite quickly now. But
Yeah,
yeah, no, I'll be adding that to it.
my physical TBR is a pile on the floor, um, and when I say a pile, it's four piles, um, and I think each one is about 5 or 6 books. Some of them I
That'd
have
be me for
read.
2 years.
I have read some of them, and they're awaiting to go to the charity shop or library or what have you. But because I don't tend to be a big book collector, I tend to have like I keep all my indie books. So if something's indie published, I always keep it because I'm like, if I want to read this again, it could be really
Yeah,
hard to find.
yeah,
Um, so they all sit on a shelf. But basically, every traditionally published book, I'm like, right, I finished it. I'll either buy the ebook or I'll buy it again to read it because it'll be easy to find.
yeah. I think I'm the other way. So usually I'll try and get things on the ebook purely because the Kindle is smaller. It's easier to carry around essentially. And if I did like the book, I'll buy the physical copy and just add it to the
Mm.
shelf.
Yeah, I'm primarily a physical reader, but I tend to when I get into a book do all three. So I'll buy the physical, the audiobook, and the ebook. And it's like so if
Yeah,
I'm putting my son to sleep, for example, I'll like get the Kindle out and read a couple of pages while he's falling asleep, or while I'm making dinner, I'll listen to the audiobook. And with Amazon, the Kindle stuff, it all synchronizes up together, so
yeah.
it works quite well. And that is how you read 52 books a year. You just spend a lot of money by getting all three versions.
So you always have your options available to you. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's.
exactly.
I'll have to learn from you, Sam.
Yeah. So that's the end of our prepared questions. Although there was one thing I wanted to run, kind of ask was how are you feeling with the launch on Saturday? Are you excited?
Oh, I'd like to say I'm really excited, and honestly, I am. But I'm a little bit nervous at the same time as well. It's just like you spent so long preparing this novel for. It's essentially I didn't write this for a target audience, so to speak. Everyone's
Mm.
like, "Oh, what's the target audience?" I wrote for me, but that's essentially what it was. I was like, I wanted this novel. But and then you actually got it for sale for other people to buy. And it's a little bit strange, actually. It's like, what are they going to think? I was like, maybe they just don't like the morally great characters, or maybe they don't like the fast pacing. But it's just Um, what I did enjoy was a week before it launched. I think it was just last weekend. I read it again.
Mm.
I still like this book. I still
Yeah.
enjoy the story. I still enjoy the characters. So it alleviated some of my fears of putting out there in front of people to buy because I think it's a decent story. I think it's a good story. I think it's a really good story,
Yeah.
and I hope people enjoy it. I'm looking forward to seeing what other people think of it. And obviously, I'm still very new to this game. I'm not saying I'm the best writer ever. I'm definitely not, and I will learn from the feedback they give me.
Mm.
But it's cool having the completion after setting off on this journey that was seemed insurmountable. You know, you actually publish a book. The whole journey for this entire process. What I wanted, it wasn't even the money; it was the hardback copy of the
Right.
book with an ISBN number on the back. That's why I did this. I wanted it,
Mm.
and it's there. That's in fact, it's in your hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wild. So it's fun seeing that level of completion because that was the goal essentially, and that's been achieved. So whatever happens now, we did
It's a
it.
bonus.
That's it. Yeah, everything else is the bonus.
Yeah, I think it'll do. I think when it finds its audience, it'll do really well. Obviously, I've not finished the book, so I can't 100% say. But I think that the pace is going to be a really strong draw because there are so many. I can. I love long fantasy books that are like, like I say, I like a 1,000-page book where half of the book is about walking from one place to the other. Like, I
Yeah,
really like those kinds of books, but then I also like books like the Dresden Files, which are like 300 pages, takes place in Chicago in the present day, and like every three chapters there's a gunfight or like a magic standoff or there's an action scene, and
yeah.
like I think there's a place in fantasy for both. And the thing that I've seen from all of the indie fantasy books that I've read have been they've all been these kind of long, epic, slower paced novels. And I think that yours is gonna it could find a real niche there with being that kind of I've just read three Wheel of Time books in a row and now I need something that will be done quickly, that will give me a
Yeah,
beginning, middle and end.
yeah.
So I think
It's
there's a real gap in the market for it.
it's one of the things that I do enjoy about a story. Maybe it's a flaw of my part, but I do like when a book just tells you the story. Essentially, you can go on these epic quests that give you tons of lore, essentially, and world building, or you can just get something that just does not relent with its story. Just tells you everything that's happening in a hopefully in a coherent manner. So yeah, we'll see. I look forward to seeing what the reception is. But yeah, you
Mm.
are right. It is very very fast paced. Even when I was rereading it, I was like, this is very. It doesn't stop, does it? Oh,
But I like that
that's
you've
good.
still managed to weave in that world building, so it's not
Mm.
like you're just kind of plopped in the world and then the story just goes. But every chapter I feel like has had a little bit of something. So you've introduced like the priest and the church stuff with Ayla. Is that her name?
Ayla
Yeah,
Knight, yeah.
Ayla. And so it's like you've introduced that stuff, but then just before that you've introduced, the town, the port town, and then you're introducing the Pyrians, and it's like, oh, everything's kind of coming together, and it's like, oh, this is that guy for the kid from the beginning, he's
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
So yeah, I
It's
really liked it. And I think, yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing it. I'm actually enjoying it. I'm reading two books at the moment because I only had the physical, obviously, for this one. So I was like, oh, if I need a book that I'm reading on ebook or an audiobook,
mm,
I'll pick something else up. So I've been reading Empire the Vampire, and that's the book where I've been constantly having to like scroll back and be like, oh, I've missed something. Oh, I've missed something. So it's been a really nice change to be able to read your book and like just get that kind of that fast paced, really kind of like straight to the point story, which I've really enjoyed.
straight to the point is definitely what it is. I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the point
it's
of the sword, as it were. Um, so I think we may as well wrap up here because I've run out of questions. And I don't want to keep you all
fine.
evening after our technical difficulties before the recording
That's
started.
fine. We got there in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you say that I could have been lip reading you this entire time.
You'd be a championship master of lip reading if you'd been doing it this whole time.
Where can people find you? So if they want to get a copy of Blood Rain, where can they buy it, and what social media or whatever would you say people should follow you on?
So, as far as following me, if you will listen to my dulcet tones and constant marketing about the book, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. Both of them are Ezra Payne Author. And if you wanted to buy the book, it is available on Amazon on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited, and from the Great British Bookshop on hardback and paperback as well. So I've hopefully covered all bases there for people who like to at least read. Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait for the audiobook if that ever does show up, but maybe we can dream. We'll see what happens.
So and that's available in internationally for Amazon, is it? Because I know
It is, yeah.
I've got quite a few viewers in America, weirdly.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's there's definitely available in America as well, in other territories, so everyone gets at least something.
brilliant. Well, guys, I think in fact, when you are watching this, my review will probably already be out because I should finish the book in a day or two. So my review will actually be out in front of this author interview, so that's exciting.
I'm
But
looking forward to seeing what the review is, to be honest.
yeah, me too. So you've probably already seen the review for this one, but I'll make sure it's linked to the description if I've had to delay it or anything like that. So please watch that if you haven't already. And as Ezra was saying, it's on Kindle Unlimited. So if you've got that subscription, you can read the book for 100% free. It's just your time and attention that you have to give over. And based on what I've read, I definitely recommend it so far. So with all that said, if you have liked this video, please give it a like. If you would like to talk to me or Ezra, if he wants to answer any questions in the comments, he may do. I won't force him to do it.
I'll answer.
Chat to us in the comments. And please do subscribe to the channel. Every little subscription helps. And I will speak to you guys tomorrow.